Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth. This is episode 7, and this one's all about secret agent debt. So, we're going to talk about all things debts, and we're really going to dig a bit into the maybe the hidden side of it, the stuff that's a bit murky, a bit difficult to understand. I'm here with Alex as well, going to provide some expertise on that. And here we go.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and hi everybody. So yeah, today's burning topic of debt. So I think we're going to cover come at it from a couple of different angles. One of which is kind of consumer debt. So the debts that people accrue buying things which don't necessarily underpin an asset. So or they underpin a depreciating asset. So you could have, you think of credit card debt where you go and you're just spending things on credit cards to for your for your lifestyle as opposed to purchasing anything. Could look at buy now, pay later, the rise of Klarna, and I think this whole thing of secret agent and the murky world of consumer debts. Klarna, and I'm sure there's others out there. That's the only one that springs to my mind. Is now becoming a front and center on any website when you're looking to buy something, and can really start to add up and cause some problems. And we'll also be covering, yeah, talking about mortgages, and we'll go through a couple of examples on how even just small additional payments can save you years and years of time and tens of thousands of pounds in interest. So I'm hoping we can have a good chat and talk about all these different aspects, and from both a financial perspective and also from a psychological perspective.
Definitely, yeah, that's a really good overview. So let's start then with probably, and this is unresearched and unfounded knowledge, but is it? Are you saying like consumer debt is the most common out of all of the ones that we've listed? And I think when we say consumer debt, we just mean debts built up by humans as consumers. The most common, I think, one of these is credit cards. I mean, when I first inadvertently got a credit or a store card, I didn't really know what I was signing up for, and I got hit with a £12 fee for paying late, and something else for not being able to make the payment because I didn't realise it wasn't automatic. So it's literally that's my first ever understanding of credit and borrowing when I think I was 19 and really naive at that point. Um, and at that point, I didn't understand it. I asked my mum about it, and she was like, "Well, this is why. This is the stuff you didn't read. This is why it's happened." And I ended up cutting it up, throwing it away, cancelling the account, and paying off whatever I owed. And I was really averse to it for a long time until I did some other learning deeper about it. And I do use credit for purchases now, but I come at it now from a much more informed perspective, and I even use it to my advantage as well.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear about the credit card and starting off at 19 and not knowing, and I think that's exactly how it's intended to be. It's almost pitched as free money. It certainly doesn't feel like it's your money when you're spending it. It's not like you see your current account decrease after you've purchased something. The some of the payment dates on that can be a little bit strange, like paying things kind of partway through a month. It doesn't fit into the natural cycle of you get your salary in at the end of the month and then you pay things out on the first of every month. I know certainly we have that with our credit card. I just think you have to use them very intentionally and be very, very careful about what you're doing with them. It's very easy to overspend. Credit card companies will often extend a limit, which is way more than you think you would ever be able to spend, in the trying to fish hook you into spending more than you yeah, more than you need to. And you have to be super disciplined, make sure everything's paid off in full, or else there is the late fees, you start accruing interest, and that interest, because the rates are so high, it's very, very difficult to catch up if you let them run away.
When you say high rates, I was just doing a bit of googling. The credit card that I have, signed up for it to get some cash back, and the I think the interest, I don't know off the top of my head, and I really should, but I think the interest rate for it's something like 28 or 29% off the bat, and my immediate credit limit that they gave me was 12 grand. I didn't ask for that amount. I just filled in the web page online, put in all my details, and within a day, I'd been accepted for the card, and they said it's been posted to you. Access your online account. La da da. Happy spending, but to extend me a line of credit for £12,000. I mean, I've never carried a balance on my credit card ever because I've now educated myself about it. I always pay it off in full by direct debit every month, but I had to set up the direct debit. It's not done automatically. It's not done for you, and my credit card, I'm paying it every month. I'm literally looking at my credit card app statement right now, and my balance is £890, which is, to be honest, a normal month for our household. It's usually around that, sometimes a bit more, sometimes less. But it says to me the balance due is the full amount that I've set up for direct debit, but the minimum amount I need to pay is £25. And that is something like 3% of the entire balance. And if you think, if I only pay 3% and I get hit with nearly 30% interest each month, I'm never going to pay that off, and I'll become practically just a slave to paying bits of that every month, which is why you've got to be really, really careful with interest rates. And really, like you said earlier, Alex, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like it's your money or it's going out because the bill is delayed, and you're going to get a bill at some point, but that's a later problem. And we've talked before about brains not really fully easily understanding the impact of things that don't happen immediately. So it's the opposite of instant gratification. It's delayed credit card bills, I guess. So that's one thing you need to look out for. We also talked about the making them enticing. So you often get free points, cash back, something for signing up to credit agreements. There's a reason there's a huge amount of like commissions on credit cards. A lot of finance people, companies will make referrals for credit cards, and that's how they get a kickback because they're so valuable, really, to sell people credit. If you're a good creditor, you pay a little bit of interest for the rest of your life. Um, I gather they don't take too kindly on people who, well, you won't get rewards, particularly if you are one of the people like you and me, Alex, who pay their bill every month and don't pay any interest.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think it's, from just seeing that minimum payment to £25 on a debt of nearly 900, it's quite stark. And I remember actually, when I used to work one of my Saturday jobs, one of my bosses, she used to actually work at a bank in their and during their training, she said, "Oh, that we were given two options for customers. Do we want a customer who's, pays all their bills, they don't have any outstanding credit card debt, they've got a healthy savings balance, like, or do we want somebody who's missing, they're in debt with us, they're missing their payments, we can charge them all these fees." And they were trained to be like, no, the customers we want are the second ones, those ones that are going to be giving us fees. So these, all of the credit cards and are set up in a way to make it as easy as possible for you to spend and as confusing as possible for you to pay. And you've really got to stay on top of it and be really disciplined with them. They treat it really with caution.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think just while you were talking about that type of ideal banking customer, I've just quickly Googled the Lloyd's Banking Group annual profits for 2022, and it's £6.9 billion as a collective in banking. And that amount of money certainly isn't coming from you or me or anyone who's responsible, pays their bills on time, doesn't hold a credit card interest debt or anything like that. It comes from loaning amounts. Some of it does come from mortgages and interest rates back from that, comes from credit cards, comes from late fees. Some of it, I guess, will come from transaction fees, swapping currencies, etc. But part of that page that I just read suggests that they've increased their bonus pool by 12%, and the amount they've given out in bonuses is £446 million, which is, to my mind, a staggering amount of money to give away. And that, not give away, give it, they'll justify it somehow as in earnings or whatever, but that money is coming from a little bit from every single person in the form of the extra fees they're paying, whether they're late fees, whether they're credit card interest and things like that. So it does go to show that that model horribly, Alex, is working for people, for the banking groups. It works for them, doesn't work for you or I or anyone else on the path to trying to get some financial stability. In fact, does the opposite.
Yeah, quite right. And those are ginormous numbers. And I actually used to work very closely with on a corporate banking side, anyways, from in my one of my previous jobs. And I was once having a chat with one of the bankers and getting on to how the banks make money. And they said, "Oh, got some off the top, some off the bottom, some from both sides, and all in the middle." So it was very much the models are set up that the banks earn very handsome profits from people and from businesses and from they do a lot of investment banking obviously generates a lot of the money from and profits for the banks as well. But yeah, any which way you look, the bank's going to be making money from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. In order to stay afloat, you need to be solvent and to offer interest rates for things. But another thing that I misunderstood in my youth is, say I have a savings account with a bank and it pays me 4% interest per year. The bank will then lend that money out at a higher interest rate. So they're using my money to make themselves money, or collectively our money to make themselves more money, which is part of the service they offer. But it really helped me to understand the flow of money and how paying a certain interest rate, say it's 4%, but lending that same money at 6%, 8%, whatever, means you're grabbing the change in the middle, which is a lot of leverage, which is essentially part of how banks work. So, just quickly swinging it back to consumer debts. So, we've talked about, I mean, how we get into debt is kind of obvious. People buy more things than they can afford. They use money that they haven't earned yet with buy now, pay later schemes. Like you said earlier, Klarna, there's also Clear Pay. And I think I saw one on PayPal the other day, like split this purchase into three, and pay it over the period of time without any interest. But if you're a little bit late, then we'll add loads of it to you. So if one of our listeners here is listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I'm in debt. These guys are saying it's not a good place." How do we help people out of debts, assuming they've already done a formal budget and they know really how much they can spare? Is it just a case of paying off the debts in a particular order? Is there a particular method of doing it that's the most efficient, or how would you suggest?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's a couple of ways and a couple of things I'll mention. So one is there are useful credit cards where you can do balance transfers onto a card and then you have 0% interest on those balances for a certain amount of time. And they can be very helpful in almost stopping interest and your debt increasing. But then you have to then be very disciplined in paying it down over a certain, say you have a debt of £1,200 and you can transfer that onto a 0% credit card and pay £100 a month within the 12-month period, you know that your debt's going to be cleared. So that's always a useful thing to, I think, to almost stabilize your position. But then if you've got several debts, there's a couple of tried and tested methods. One is called the debt snowball and one is called the debt avalanche. So the snowball is very much so what that involves is list out your debts, and you'll be paying the minimum balances on all of them. But then on the smallest debt, you will then pay any excess that you have onto that small one, regardless of what the interest rate is. On the avalanche side, you're going to do the same, to list everything out, but you're going to be paying off the debt with the highest interest rate. So mathematically, the avalanche is the best one because you'll be paying less interest over the time period. However, if you are what the snowball is very good at is, say if you've got 6 or 7 debts and some are quite small, you can knock some of those off in a quite short space of time. So it helps to build momentum. So it really depends on, I guess, a personality and personal preference. But those are two methods of looking at ways of organizing your debt and clearing it. And in addition, there's always ways to try and earn a little bit of extra money to put towards them. So people will have things in their house that they don't need and can be sold. Even playing the banks at their own game and doing current account switching. So over the last year, I made to over £500 just by switching bank accounts, and it's super easy to do. Um, and it's they reward you quite well for doing it. They just generates a lot of paperwork, but that's an afterthought. But I think you should always be looking when you've got your debts. You know what you're targeting is trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible, and almost goes without saying, but not increasing those debts and signing up for more things. So it's all about control and attack these things and get rid of them as fast as you can. Would be my two my 2 cents.
I think that a period of understanding would come first, and then a plan to tackle it. Either way, snowball, avalanche. I'm not sure why they're both mountain snow references, particularly, but the one that makes the most mathematical sense is the avalanche one. But it can feel like you're not really making any headway if your biggest debt at the biggest interest rate is only going down by what you think is a small amount per month. There's an interesting thing that I read about this snowball method before we hit record. Like, you pay the smallest one first, and you say, you like Alex said, you have 7 of them. Pay the smallest one, and 7 becomes 6 within a month, maybe 2 or 3, and that psychologically is easier because it's one less. The amount you have is going down, and then you use that money you did put towards debt number 7, and when it's clear you have that spare money, assuming you're continuing to work, and you put all of that plus the minimum payment to debt number 6, whichever one you pick. So if you're paying £40 a month to debt 7, and then you clear it, and that you have that plus the minimum to add to the next one, and it just, the amount you have of available disposable cash gets bigger the more debt you pay off and the more of those you extinguish. And then, because you're so used to it coming out of your account, the idea is once you've paid 2 or 3 of them off, you'll have a bigger pot of money to throw at the larger remaining debts. And I've seen it work really well for people on the Money Saving Expert website, in the debt forums, the boards there. They're really, really helpful, full of people who are supporting each other, and they're all really on the same path of clearing their debts. So if anyone is in debt like that, I would heartily recommend the Money Saving Expert. The debt free boards there are really, really helpful. There's even one for mortgages as well. And I think, just as a general understanding, that if you understand that the credit card companies, the banks, however you borrow money, is there to make money off of you. Essentially, you are the product, and they're excuse the pun, but banking on you not being able to pay this off. So you're then paying an interest rate, and you're part of the reason that that banking group we mentioned earlier, Lloyd's, there are obviously others, but have for over £400 million to give away, and give away, but attribute somewhere in bonus payments. That comes a little bit from you, a little bit from someone else, a little bit from your neighbour, a little bit from every household, and it can really, really add up. So that's where those colossal figures come from. In terms of, say, Alex, for example, someone sets their budget, they work out they've got money to pay off their debts, they work really hard over the next couple of years, and they pay each of those off. Are you advocating close the accounts, cut the cards up, reduce the amount of available credit to yourself just to help not go right back into it? Because I've seen a lot of stories of people who've paid off thousands of pounds worth of debt, had all of that freedom back again, and then for some reason they find themselves back in debt again in a couple of months.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it depends on the individual. I think what you'll sometimes find is where people have gone through the journey of paying all these off and being super disciplined, that they maintain that level of discipline. It depends really on the person. Certainly cutting up unnecessary cards, store cards, anything like that that you've accrued and you now know that you no longer need, definitely get rid of it. A credit card can be helpful in some situations, and if you're, as you mentioned at the beginning, very disciplined with your spending, you can earn cash back. But I think if you feel that you are going to be tempted into using up all this credit that the banks have offered you, then I would, yeah, close the accounts, get rid of them. There is another argument around credit scores. Help credit scores are a bit of a sticky subject. Having a credit card and showing that you can utilize it can boost your credit score. And if you've come through a period of over borrowing and then now you're clearing them down, even just having an account with a balance with no balance on it, but the credit limit can be, or paying it off on time and frequently and showing that you can now manage small amounts of debt is helpful to build up a credit score, which if you then want to go and borrow money for a house or get a mortgage, can be beneficial in the rate that you get. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. I think certainly if you are feel you're an individual that is really tempted to just be spending because it's there, then not having it is probably the much better course of action than kind of keeping it open with it burning a hole in your pocket.
I would agree entirely. So, in terms of how brains work, if you say you've worked really hard and you've paid off £5,000 worth of credit card debt and you've got a £5,000 limit, your brain will automatically it will see things on the street other people will have, and they'll say, "Oh, I bought this. It was only £300 or whatever." And then your brain will be like, "Oh, you just worked really hard to pay off your credit card, so you've got that money there. Maybe you could use that." And you won't have this thought as clearly as I've articulated it. It'll be in the background, and then it'll happen again and again, and eventually your willpower is going to disappear because will is infallible, and it won't be as strong as you need it to be forever. Much easier to make problems go away, just to swipe a credit card, ding it wherever with a watch or something, or just enter it on into an online shop, and there you go, and you're back in the cycle. So I've heard of really, I would do anything you can do to get off that treadmill, off of that cycle that you've been running on for ages. I've heard of people keeping like closing accounts for all other cards, keeping one credit card for emergencies. And I read once, Alex, on on the money saving expert forums that someone put it in a block of ice and they froze it, so they literally had to get it out the freezer, smash the ice to pieces to be able to get their credit card back out. And it's just putting these, in this case, physical freezing cold barrier in the way for your brain to think, actually, do I need it? Do I just want it? Can I get by without it? And it's real. Some people might think that's way over the top, but it's something that's worked for another person, and it's something that's maybe way over the top, but it's something that was necessary at the time to get someone out of, like you say, a sticky situation. So, really, whatever works for you, take ideas from places like the debt free boards from other people. If you don't trust yourself to have an open line of credit for the time being, close all of them and reopen them once you've learned a bit more, things are a bit more stable, and you're in a place where you think you can responsibly borrow. Just thinking on credit scores and the systems that impact that, it's a bit of a dark art and a bit shady. I don't fully understand it, and Alex, you articulated it well before, but anything the way you pay something, you sign up to pay something monthly, and that can be mobile phone contract, it can be a car payment if you have a car on finance, it can be a gym membership, or anything recently that requires a subscription that will have a positive or negative impact on your credit score. So don't think you must have a credit card to get some of the benefits of having a better or an above average credit score. So, in terms of, I think we've covered, I mean, kind of debts, credit cards, and methods of paying things off. Before we move to mortgages, is there anything else you wanted to mention on that vein?
No, I think we've covered a lot, and I love the example about the credit card in ice. I think that's yeah, it goes to it just proves the point. I think of it's you need to be put resistance in the way between you and any unnecessary purchases and things. And yeah, credit card in ice is yeah, one of the best ones I've heard. But no, nothing else really to cover. I think we've spoken a lot about the the consumer debts.
Okay, so let's talk mortgages then. And I think people don't see mortgages as a debt, as a negative thing. I personally, I do see it as an amount of money, often a large amount of money that's owed from one person to an institution like a bank or a building society or something. So I I don't I don't like the term good debt because all debt is owing one person owing someone else an amount of money or a favor or something. And if you have that thing where you owe somebody something, then there's an imbalance of power, essentially, if we're thinking about it from a psychological point of view. So with mortgages, I personally have seen a lot of people take on humongous mortgages because that's the maximum that the bank will say that they can borrow. And I'm not sure if the multipliers for mortgages have changed recently, but a lot of my nursing colleagues bought houses when they were lucky enough to buy houses at the really low interest rates, and we're talking sub 1% here. And they borrowed right up to the maximum they could because the bank told them it was affordable. Didn't, I don't think, anticipate some rate changes and anything like that. So it can really, really struggle. So my thinking with it is, say the banks suggest to you, "Oh, Alex, you can borrow £300,000 on your partner's combined salary or your single salary or something like that, and it's only this much per month." That to me, it ties you into earning that amount of money until that debt is gone. Because if you earn less, it suddenly becomes very unaffordable. And if you're in a really high pressured job and you've got a long commute or you're just stressed by that, it can feel a bit like an anchor or a ball and chain. Because if you have to keep meeting these payments in order to keep this your life the way you're normally living it, the way you're accustomed to, and to keep this roof above you and your family's head, that's a humongous psychological weight that you're carrying. So, Alex, over to you for more on really mortgages, and we'll cover some interest rates and calculations, illustrations as well. But where do you stand on people buying too much house? Do you think that's a thing, or do you think I've made a mountain out of a molehill here?
Yeah, I do think I think people can buy too much house, and I think the same. Just going back to kind of at the beginning with, you know, mortgages are a very good way of, and often the only way of purchasing a house. I think people can get hung up on how much is it going to cost me per month, rather than looking at the mortgage over the lifetime and how much you're actually going to be borrowing and repaying, and the sacrifice during that time is your time. And you have to be it's very easy to be chained into jobs that you don't like, or you know sticking with, might be getting, working with horrendous colleagues, just, and it's all because, well, I'm doing my job because I have to pay the mortgage. And banks will very happily extend you, 4 to 5 times your salary or joint salary, but that's not necessarily meaning that you should be borrowing that amount. There's also, I think, quite a lot of in society, a bit of a stigma is the wrong word, but it's a way to show off a little bit to others. And oh well, my house is worth X, or you know, I bought my house for X, or look at it on Zoopla now. What you don't often see is, yeah, well, I only own a tiny share of that because I have a ginormous mortgage against it. And so, yeah, for me, they are things you have to buy the right house for you, but I think it's avoiding that trap of just because you can borrow doesn't necessarily mean you should. And it's you got to be really careful of the implications of doing so.
So thinking about people in England buying too much house, I mean, as an off thought, buying a house in England is seen as a milestone that people need to achieve, but actually, throughout Europe, England's one of the only places where people strive to own their own homes. I know from past research I've done in Germany, it's people mostly rent their houses and they just rent them for forever. And home ownership is seen as solidifying your in one place, and you can't travel. You're not as free to move. And I've heard a lot of people think that they don't want to put roots down and buy houses. This was before houses got major expensive because they wanted the freedom to up and move around the country, in and out of Europe, all over the world. You hear stories now of people working remotely and living in a really low cost of living country and earning a salary in English pounds or US dollars or something that's strong in the foreign exchange. So it's an interesting way. You don't need to obviously live in England and buy houses, but if you were thinking of it, we just had a quick Google, or I did, whilst Alex was talking, and I came across a website called Property Industry Eye. I've never heard of them before. However, it says the average cost for 1 square foot of your property in the UK is currently £331. And a rough estimate that my chair that I'm sitting on is taking up about 3 square feet. So I'm sitting on effectively £900 worth of space, which is quite crazy to think about. And I'm wearing a £1 charity shop jumper. So the figures obviously change depending on where you are, but I'll just run through some stats of where we're at. So for April 2023, the average price per square foot, and these are houses that have exchanged, so they've sold. The highest one, no surprise, comes as Inner London, £724, which has seen a 9.3% increase since 2019 April. The cheapest place in England is the North East at £170 per square foot. The other places notable: Yorkshire 227, the Southwest 371, Wales 226. Wales and Yorkshire quite similar, mountainous, rains a lot. Scotland 200, where I originally grew up in the East Midlands, £270 per square foot. And actually, in the East Midlands and the Southwest and Wales have seen the most percentage increase in the last 4 years. So between 27 and 30% extra. So I suppose all we've learnt from that is the ideal time to buy a house in these regions was 4 years ago. Sorry to not be of much use. However, Alex is going to come back in now, and we're going to talk about illustrations of mortgages. So if you have a big mortgage, the difference that making a small overpayment can make on how much of your life you get back from having this debt around you, and also how much money it saves you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And yeah, interesting the square foot, the price per square feet. It's I think it's a good way of approaching house hunting. Actually, is looking at it like that rather than looking at the total price. So yeah, I'm just going to cover just a couple of examples of overpaying a mortgage and how much you can actually save both in interest, so in dollars and cents, and also in how much time how much of your life you can reclaim back. So I've just got a couple of examples here. So one is a £180,000 mortgage over 25 years at a 4.5% interest rate. So if you have that, you'll be paying £1,000 a month, and over the life of that mortgage, you'll be paying just over £300,000. So you borrowed 180, and you'll be paying about £120,000 in interest over that time, and that's 25 years. So if you were to just overpay by say £200 a month, now if we remember, like if we think back to if you're overpaying some consumer debts and they're now all cleared, that'll be freeing you up some extra cash, and that would be paying over just £200 a month. You'd be mortgage free in 6 years and 7 months earlier, and you'd be saving just over £35,000 in interest. So huge, huge impact on both, not just, £35,000 is a lot of money, but you call it 7 years of your life you're getting back by paying say if you're with a partner and you both got your name on the mortgage, pay £100 each, you're potentially then free and clear in 19 years, which is unbelievable. And it's a similar position. Just if we say if we increase the interest rate, we're in a higher interest rate environment, same mortgage, £180,000, but 5.5% interest rather than 4.5, so you'd be paying £1,105 a month, and over the life of the mortgage that you're going to be paying £331,000, so you'd be paying £151,000 of interest. So pretty much the same amount again that you borrowed, you're actually paying in interest to the bank. And paying that £200 a month overpayment, you'd be debt free 6 years and 9 months and be saving £46,000 in interest. So an unbelievable like magnitude of numbers, both in terms of interest being saved. But for me, the big thing is the time that you're saving. So that is, 6 to 7 years of your life that you get back. So you don't have that pressure of having to be commuting into a stressful job or working with colleagues that you don't like, or you know dealing with bosses that belittle you, or whatever it might be. You don't have that pressure, and you're suddenly going to be freeing up that mortgage payment. In that example, you'd be paying just over £1,300 a month if you carried on working, and hopefully you do and you enjoy your job and it's fulfilling. You've got an extra £1,300 a month coming into your bank account and not going out, which is again a great opportunity to start building up some wealth. So for me, and I think it's most people sharpen their pencils and really review their monthly spending, and they're maybe creative and pushing to get potentially promotions or doing extra shifts at work. Finding something like £200 can almost be life changing. So yeah, Alex, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. If you do this yourself, or that'd be great to know.
Firstly, some of those figures are staggering, but especially the bit that jumped out to me the most is not only the money you'd save and the time, but the difference in those examples is 1% as an interest rate. One of them's 4.5, one of them's 5.5. And the 1% extra ends up costing you £31,000, £31,500 extra. So that really, when people say it's only 1%, can't make that much of a difference. But over your lifetime, it's making 30 grand's worth of difference. And if you've ever wanted like a Maserati in retirement or whatever car you like, that will go a long way to getting you behind the wheel of something like that. And I think it's like you say as well, people can not misallocate money, but they can miss an opportunity given they if they get a pay rise, they get a bonus, they could be paying a little bit off their mortgage. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who every year is the job he gets. All employees in the company get an annual bonus, and all he does is treat that money as a bonus as it is. He doesn't allocate it anywhere. He just pays the entire lot off his mortgage every year, and doing so over the last few years, he's told me he's knocked off something like 7 years of his mortgage of his life being of having a mortgage over his life. He's knocked that off just paying his bonus in. Obviously, it's not guaranteed he'll get it all the time, but to me, that's an incredible use because what he's doing is he's buying himself freedom and he's buying himself time and not having to work so hard to pay off the biggest purchase that he's probably ever going to make. And it's just something to think about. Like if you do have you work an extra shift for £100 extra, you can buy, I don't know, a pair of trainers or whatever you've got half an eye on, or with that extra thing, you can buy yourself a couple of months of freedom of not having to pay that. And really, the earlier you pay it off your mortgage over that time frame, the more interest you're going to save because you've made the payment early. So even to humour yourself, do the maths. There are loads of overpayment mortgage calculators online. Just Google it. It's one will come up. Tap your figures in. A lot of them will do you a graph as well, and just have a look and see how much even a smaller overpayment doesn't have to be 200, can be 20, can be 50, can be whatever you made selling stuff on eBay that month. And really, you're buying more square feet of your house each time you do something like that. And Alex, I wonder if, because it's something we didn't cover, with the way mortgage payments are structured, early in your mortgage, you're actually repaying a lot of interest and less capital. And there's a crossover point during the life of a mortgage where it becomes 50-50. So in those examples, you're paying £1,000 a month off your mortgage, but what you might actually be doing is paying £800 interest and 200 off the capital. So you're actually buying very little because a lot of mortgages, I think, are front weighted. Is that the right term, or is there a different technical term for that?
Yeah, it's a good point. And if you type in a loan amortization schedule, that is essentially what your mortgage is. And it's because if you imagine a loan or a mortgage being almost like a reverse investment. So when you start to invest, you'll invest small amounts at the beginning and your interest is small, but then compounds and grows to a large amount over time. If you imagine you're doing the reverse with a mortgage, is that it starts off as a huge balance and the interest that's being applied is onto a large loan balance. And then as and when you are repaying the loan principal, the amount of interest that you pay starts to reduce. And so as you get, over the say 25 or 30-year period, whatever it is that your loan is over, at the end of your mortgage term, and say the last 5, 6, 7 years, most of what you'll be overpaying is then your principal. But yeah, right at the front is interest, and it's important actually to say that when you do make a mortgage overpayment, you can either set up a regular monthly amount or pay it off in lump sums as and when, but that is all against what they call the loan principal. So that's essentially buying your house. You're not paying any interest on that. What you save is the interest on that amount of money. So yeah, so if you put a £1,000 lump sum against your mortgage, if you have a bonus or whatever, that is £1,000 more of your house that you are owning. There is no interest on that. But no, it's a really good point to bring up.
Yes, and I think it's worth, just as a last note on mortgages here, you can usually, and it will depend on the loan that you've taken from the bank, so check with them, but you can usually pay up to 10% of your remaining balance off as an overpayment per year without incurring any extra fees. So if it's, say, for example, you borrow £300,000, 10% of that is 30, so you can pay off £30,000 of that buying square feet of your house or bricks or whatever without paying any extra fees or early repayment charges as they're known. So even if it's a little bit each month, if it's a lot each month, you're buying yourself not only your house, but it's security financially, psychologically for you and your family, and really it enables you to take the stress out of it. You can do a less stressful job, a less high paid job. You can work part time. You could start a passion project or something because you're not beholden to this colossal debt that English people seem to be preoccupied with. Alex, is there anything else you can think of around mortgages, debt repayments that we've not mentioned that you think would be useful?
I think we've covered a lot, and I think for me the theme and the why behind it all is exactly what you were just saying then around its freedom and its flexibility, and you are buying your time and you're buying your life you're buying your life back. And that for me is because it can often be a struggle and feel quite like drudgery, just overpaying the mortgages or you're trying to clear credit card debts. It can be a real slog, but remembering why you're doing it, and that why is freedom and it's flexibility, and it's ultimately the pursuit of a much it's a better life for yourself at the other end. So that's the kind of the final thing I would add on that is just remember why we're doing all this, and it is freedom above all.
Yes, I mean, I would agree because we think very similarly on this, but having the freedom to do what you want with your time is probably, no, not probably, it is the most valuable thing you can use money for, not to buy trinkets or shoes or material possessions, but to be able to do whatever you like within the law reasons, of course, but whatever you like, whenever you like, with the people that you love is, in my opinion, the best use of money that you can do, and by making some small steps in the right direction, you can achieve things like that. And they don't need to be big steps. They can be £20 here, £30 there, £50 there if you've got some extra cash. And I've never met anyone who's regretted overpaying their mortgage. From an emotional, psychological point of view, I've not done it myself. I'm a long way off it, but from reading a lot forums, books, people always say making the last mortgage overpayment brings a huge sense of relief. Some people say that they feel a lot more stable knowing that their name's on the deeds, that they own every brick in their house, and that payment is now gone. And I've heard people put that mortgage payment money into their savings, they invest it, they treat themselves to a car that they want, they pay for their kids to go through college, go on a family holiday, whatever you want to do with that money is yours. You earned it, you worked hard enough for it. Um, do if you are in the position to do that, you're close to paying your mortgage off, or you have done, I really hope you spent some of that money you saved on you and your family because you deserve it. That's a colossal thing to achieve. And there's an awful lot of stories again on the Money Saving Expert website of people paying off their mortgages, strategies for earning extra money, and a lot of people do the maths as well and break down what they've saved over the years. So it's really eye opening once you dig a bit, do a little maths or use one of the calculators, how much of your life energy and your money that you can save. So hopefully that's been useful. If you have any questions, queries, or anything for either of us, you can wing them to us by email, which is nursingyourwaytowealth@gmail.com. Alex, anything more from you?
No, I think that's been a pretty comprehensive episode.
I would agree. It's been a bit long. So until next time. None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.